During my time in service, I fired a lot of different firearms. My favorite weapon, whenever we had to requalify, was firing the M203 grenade launcher. This thing was sweet. The reason being, it was the most fun to shoot. Using Kentucky windage, we would thread grenades through car windows, building windows, and doorways. And if you happen to not get it through the hole the first time, just go ahead, adjust a little, and try again. It was always fast to qualify for, and for the annual requalifications. However, once you qualified for it, that means you could be deployed with it, and the extra added weight at the end of your M4 carbine made the M4 with the 203 attachment more cumbersome. The underbarrel was not unbearable, but noticeable, especially when you're packing all of the grenades to go along with it. Now, I'm happy I can kick back and play Halo with modified grenade launchers. Trooper Firefight, a Halo Reach mod created by Boyd Model that I've showcased before, includes a modified weapon with a underbarrel grenade launcher, and it's so much fun to use. This grenade launcher in Trooper Firefight adds a particular skill dynamic that enriches the weapon sandbox and rewards you, the player, when you get it right with a relative effective splash damage radius. We started wielding an official grenade launcher in Halo when we stepped foot on Reach. The grenade launcher's nickname is the Pro Pipe, as opposed to the Noob Tube. The Pro Pipe appeared again in Halo 5 Guardians, and it's hilarious when you can bait other players into coming over to the grenade because it's glowing and they're not sure of what it is. Then you let go of the trigger and they're eviscerated. But just how practical is the grenade launcher from Halo Reach? Using the sniper rifle scope, we see the Spartan is 40 meters away from me. Okay, so does this distance line up accurately with the grenade launcher's distant marking? Approximately where the Spartan was standing and getting a hole-in-one, we can see the grenade sits 40 meters away from us. Okay, cool, so the tracking device is accurate, but what would need to be done for this grenade launcher to truly be practical for modern people? I like that the grenade launcher is on its own, so you can easily stow it instead of adding weight to the front end of the weapon. So Instructor Lespina, head of Spear Training Group, examined the grenade launcher and determined what makes sense and what does not. You, me, and Lespina have all been enjoying these videos, and they are fun to make. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. However, there are people like this guy that take it very seriously. He keeps complaining but keeps watching each video. Fellas, he's like that girl that just keeps running back to you. He just can't get enough. So in this video, let's see how Lespina went from the grenade launcher we were introduced to in Halo Reach to his own design as seen here. It's interesting to listen to him deep dive into these weapons and how the design can be more practical. Let's listen in.
Hello and welcome back again. Thank you guys for the opportunity to do this. We are going to be looking into the M319 grenade launcher. This has been a great learning experience in how to deliver and how to develop this type of stuff. Now, first off, I want to point out this is not an underbarrel grenade launcher. This is a standalone launcher, or an individual grenade launcher in this particular case. This is not unknown. That would be like the M79 Thumper, I believe it was, from the Vietnam era, which is also chambered in a 40 caliber cartridge. We also have M203s and M320s from today, and there are several variations. This is overall a really good idea to have. And I do understand that the original assault rifle was planned to have a underbarrel grenade launcher, and this unfortunately would not be the same grenade launcher. Due to its break action design, it would be very difficult to load. So this is a completely separate standalone grenade launcher, and that's a good idea. Desert Storm and early GWAT era underbarrel grenade launchers are great to have handy and awesome to have on the team, but that is a lot of extra weight. It's a couple extra pounds on the very end of your gun. That is a lot of weight to support. That's whenever we started migrating over to the 320 as a standalone launcher. So now the Grenadiers are carrying their primary rifle, which is fairly lightweight because it doesn't have a underslung grenade launcher. They are able to deploy the grenade launcher whenever they need it, not have it all the time on tap. So sure, there is a give and take there, as with everything, as we've discussed in the past. There's always a give and a take to this. It is also going to be much more manageable and user-friendly. Single shot break action explosives, yeah, I agree there. All of the measurements add out great. I'll create a little conversion table for every single weapon, and we'll go in and actually measure those out. And all of the measurements actually measure out really good on this. And I do got to say, overall, most of these Halo weapons are very well designed overall. Some of the things that I'm just nitpicking on are exactly that. They're just nitpicks. The ammunition is actually one of the things that I'm going to get a little in-depth on. Breach loading, break action. Again, here's really important stuff. This was created during the insurrection, so this was before we encountered the Covenant. So the design philosophy and production philosophy and the training philosophy behind this was used against humanoid and human strategies and human tactics, which is perfectly in line. Grenade launchers weed out entrenched enemies, say in a window or barricaded area or bunkers. They can also be deployed as crowd control to deploy gas, smoke. That is a similar implied role here. Grenade launchers are a very support role type of equipment. And as I explained in the Saw video, support weapons have a massive role on the team. For example, the support role for the Saw was to keep enemy heads down so you can maneuver. The grenade launcher here is to dig out the enemy from an entrenched position. It allows a very high capability. Almost everything here in this information is very good, very well thought out. I like this quite a bit. This is a well thought out weapon. Now, it's important to note here, I'm trying to get my ranges. This little Christmas tree thing is a real world thing. How this works, generally speaking, in the real world, you see how it has a 3? If an enemy's shoulder width fits between here, their average sizes for shoulder widths of combat age males. If the shoulder width fits between this bracketing area, let me make this larger. This bracketing area, that would be an enemy combatant at about 300 meters or yards, whichever conversion table we're using here. Likewise for 200 or 400, 500, 600, 700. However, spoiler alert, what I'm doing here is trying to see if I can range out these barricades. Now, I know that these barricades are a bit larger than the average Marine, the average size. So I know that I'm not measuring from edge of barricade to edge of barricade, as you see here. So from about this line to this line here, this optic and sighting system would imply that this is 600 or so meters away. Turns out this is actually 240 or so. You'll see that here in a little bit. This is one of the ways that I gain measurements in game if there's none directly available. Now here I'm testing drop. You can see I was aiming directly at it and it was still falling low. Here in a little bit, you'll also see that I start getting my range down here at the bottom off of this read. Part of me had assumed that these numbers that are moving, I'll zoom in on them here in a little bit, I'd assume these might be angles. So you move it up to a 45-degree angle and it would say 45. It turns out that's not the case.
Stepping in for a moment with a different video within Forge World for more clarity. Looking as straight up as possible, the numbers do not display 90 degrees, despite looking at a 90-degree angle relative to the weapon. Now to turn it back over to Lespina.
Then I started thinking maybe it's a range. Maybe as I raise it, it gives me a range out to 300, 200, 400, however far away. It turns out that was incorrect as well. So these numbers do not replicate the angle of fire, and they don't replicate the effective range. These numbers they're seemingly ineffective at giving us accurate readouts and shots.
With that said, Bungie's intent was to communicate a simplified angle to the ballistic, a reticle that has dynamic increments like this that move up and down. In any game, this speaks to me that there's an angle to the trajectory. Since most reticles in Halo remain static regardless of pitch, this certainly implies to a first-time player, this projectile is going to drop, so you must compensate. However, once Lespina shows you a more practical grenade launcher design, he will include a more practical reticle as well.
Let's take a look at this ammunition type. High explosive dual purpose grenade. Okay, good. Dual purpose generally implies that it has a light bit of penetrating capability, generally going to be used as anti-vehicle to a very light vehicle role. And EMP grenades. EMP is a very technical term for a very technical type of thing. More than likely, it would be EW grenade or electronic warfare grenade. Because whenever the EMP effect hits a vehicle in game, it tends to disable the vehicle for a moment. EMPs generally completely fry the electronics. There are cases where they can momentarily disable electronics, but more than likely, if the chips and processors and capacitors are large enough, EMPs will completely destroy the electronic components, which would outright disable the vehicle. The fact that the vehicles come back online make me think that this would be more so an electronic warfare grenade because they come back up momentarily afterwards. Electronic warfare is just a temporary disabling of features. It doesn't destroy the actual mechanics always, but it disables them in the moment during the duration of the effects of the grenade. So it would probably be more effective to say this is electronic warfare grenade. The fact that we have a remote trigger and detonation, it's not impossible to do something like that. It does mean that we're going to have some transmitters and receivers. The fact that our display can apparently tell us that there are enemies in range and will be damaged is really interesting tech. It kind of makes me wonder for continuity's sake, while we don't have that feature in predictive weapon systems. Overall, is it possible to do something like that? I mean, yeah, but whenever we include tech onto a munition, like a grenade in this case, that can sense life forms around it, and if they're in the kill radius, that is area within the munition that could have been more explosive to give us a better radius and more effect on target. So, though it's cool, I think it would have been cool or better to do away with that. We would have had a more effective grenade launcher had we not have to cram additional tech onto the munition. It's interesting that this rifling is on the back of the round. Now, the barrel has to be large enough for the warhead of the munition to leave. That means this spin on the back is not actually engaging with the barrel. There are cases where this spiraling can help keep it in flight. It's going to interact with the air molecules as it's flying through the air and possibly keep it spinning a little bit longer. One thing I do absolutely want to kick this grenade launcher for and the munition itself for. It appears to glow when in the air and have a sparking effect. That is not really the case. Once grenades are fired, they are fired. There's no additional munition for the most part. It shouldn't have a blinking light on it because that gives away the position of the munition, and it allows counter or just avoidance maneuvers in general. From a gameplay mechanic, it tells you where the grenade is. That way you can sense it and detonate it at the right time, right? So our rear grip and all these mechanisms on the back actually seem pretty good. I'm a big fan of how this is laid out. You seem to have a crossbolt safety. You don't need more than that on a single shot munition like this, so that's good to go. Generally, triggers on grenade launchers are really heavy. It's part of a safety mechanism with them. You have to be very intentional about firing it. So this is probably going to be a very heavy trigger, which could imply that it is going to have this full length of travel. That's fine. This appears to be an articulating armature. I wasn't able to quite see it in the animations, but it looks as if this entire bar dips down, or it's just some type of recoil support system, whatever. I don't change this because it doesn't really hurt too much to have it on there. It's already pretty protected from anything coming in on it, and if it is a mechanical piece, I'm not gonna change that too much. However, it is worth noting the mechanical bits that I can see on here are more than enough to hold the recoil of the 40mm round that's being fired. There's low velocity, medium velocity, and high velocity. High velocity is reserved for mounted weapons like the Mark 19, low and medium. And from in-game, the information I was able to collect based on the ranging, the time in flight, these appear to be low velocity rounds. Even the low velocity of modern day have more effective range than the round in game here. With that said, There can be a lot of other variables, such as the gravity of wherever you're at, the air resistance of wherever you're at, and the payload of the munition itself. However, the payload on this munition is very light. It should have a larger explosive range and radius than it does. But, again, we are accounting for additional tech on board of that grenade launcher, or that grenade itself, so that might be taken away from our blast radius. This back here, this entire section here, is generally where we're going to be housing our fire control groups and stuff. For the most part, you're going to have a big old hammer or some type of other firing mechanism that gets triggered by, the trigger, and smacks it. This is all encased. It can be a shrouded hammer. This does not need to exist as an external component. Most grenade launchers anyway are double action, so they're completely articulated by the trigger pull itself. Having a separate hammer here to do that is not necessary. This lever here is generally the lever that would break the weapon in half, that way you can load around. However, this is very far outside of our usable grip. Generally, you want to, especially with modern disciplines, you want to be able to access your controls from a firing grip. You can't do that here. You would have to bring up your support hand, click it off. So on the updated variant, we are going to do away with this, and I'm going to assume we place a button on the opposite side to break that action a lot easier with the firing grip. All of this bulk here does not seem to have a purpose. Again, these are low velocity rounds. They aren't containing a massive explosion per se. This transfer bar at the top, that seems to be some type of piston or collapsing mechanical bit. I don't know what it is. It doesn't seem to have a purpose from what I can see. Our rear sight, the reticle on there itself doesn't quite help with accuracy. We're going to go over a reticle redesign as well. This little hook doesn't seem to have a purpose. We do away with that. Carry handle doesn't have a purpose. If you were to grab onto this carry handle, because the pivoting point is up here, more than likely this weapon is going to try to sag on the back end, so that carry handle doesn't really help balance the weapon. Not to mention, this weapon isn't incredibly thick as is. You can just grip it like this if you don't want to get a firing grip, and now you're centered up. Front sight, interestingly, it's got these two separate prongs. I'm not hugely opposed to it, but we are going to make a change there just so there's slightly less material in play and slightly less snag hazard in play. Foldy grip, I actually really like this foldy grip, but I do away with it. This is a single shot weapon. If this were, say, a shotgun where we needed to pump the action, I wouldn't be opposed to this. There's a shotgun discipline that specifically uses vertical grips, and it makes vertical grips a very good option. But because that's not this gun, not really necessary. This is a lot of extra bulk and mass to have. And why do we want rails on our grenade launcher? Am I putting a flashlight on this? Well, probably not. Main reason being because I'm going to have to arc this thing at a pretty high angle in order to drop grenade on something. If I've got a flashlight, it's just signing into the sky. Or a laser sighting system, again, I'm going to have to arc this thing, so a laser sighting system doesn't really help. And is this maybe for a separate articulating aiming device? We do have those, but we've already got an aiming device on board the weapon itself. Why would we want this rail? This is extra material and wasted space. As for the computer, no qualms. I like it. I'm going to keep it. This is more than likely going to be in between compact and firepower. Accuracy, yeah, we do obviously need some level of accuracy, but you'll actually see that soldiers with M203s and stuff, they just kind of get a feel for it. Yeah, you kind of just lob around and you're like, a little bit more, and then you do a little bit more. Part of me wanted to make a stock that could mount here, but it did not. Maybe even a folding stock like on our breacher shotgun variant. The reason we don't is because, again, this is just kind of a stowaway weapon. This is something we can whip out real quick, lob around, and that's. Let's take a look at the redesign. We just slimmed down some of the fat, but I do want to keep some of the aesthetic. Now, there is a thing I wanted to point out. I've said it in some comments, but I don't think I've actually said it in a video. Whenever I'm making these redesigns, I'm not leaning 100% into making it the most practical gun in the world. I want to retain some of the art style and some of the original intent with the weapon. But it's always a balance of how much do I take away and how much do I add. I like to think about it as increasing practicality by, say, 50%. For one, we reduced all of the bulk on the back side here. Yep, all of this bulk, all this material, there's less snag. Remember, this is a stowaway weapon. It needs to hang onto your gear or equipment when not in use. Holdy grip is gone. Our carrying handle is gone. Now, I do still retain this little nub up front. It's important to note, even though this is a low velocity round, they still have recoil. So having your firing hand here is going to kind of help, having this little nub whenever it does recoil. That way it doesn't just kick back and hit you in the face. So I did decide to keep that. Now, all of the extra material, all that bulk, we just removed it and more or less made it smooth barrel under here. I did extend some of the lines just to keep some of the artistic design, the original intent, but for the most part, it's just barrel. Now, all of this aiming module and stuff up here, this is where I do want to look at a little bit closer. And this rear sight and front sight, which by the way, we reduced to one prong and made it smaller. We also made the rear sight just a little bit smaller to mimic the reduction of the front sight, so the sighting system should still be the same. However, why keep this entire housing? Well, artistic. It kind of looks good. I personally like the way it looks, so I'm going to keep it on there. It could be implied that there might be a ranging system in here, a laser range finder. So whenever you zero out this sight, you're looking at the lowest possible point over the front sight. You can hit a button on the back and that will tell you the range. Maybe there's a display on this computer that will tell us that range. And then now that we have that range of, say, 240 meters, that'll be important here in a minute. We know that this weapon has a maximum range of 240 or so meters. And that will tell us the angle to fire at, 45-degree angle. So then, 45 degrees being our maximum arc, we would put our front sight post through that top 45-degree angle and take our shot. To really articulate how grenade launcher optics and sighting works, we have a video. You're going to see this repeating. Let me show you what we're looking at. Remember, our old reticle doesn't look this way at all. It has a big circle, a whole bunch of dashes underneath it, and none of them move with the tilt of the weapon. If you take a look at the ranging on the rear sight and the relationship between the front sight, if we put that front sight in between that blank area, that will be the ranging. So if we set that range to, say, 155 meters like right now, that's going to be a 20-degree arc. And the round is going to fly through the air and drop onto the target. Now, where did I get these numbers from? Very, very rough math. Somebody with much more math knowledge and experience is going to have to look at these numbers. Because, unfortunately, we don't have the mass of the projectile and how heavy it is. So this is very, very back of the napkin math. But what I do know is that a 45-degree arc in-game, we get an effective range of about 240 meters. So if we approximate some of that and be a little loose with our numbers, this is going to be about what a ranging card would look like on our weapon. Now notice, the further away the enemy gets, he really doesn't move that far away. The variation in numbers gets much smaller. For example, the difference between 41 and 82, that's 41 whole meter difference. The difference at the very end of our range card is only a difference of about 4 meters, which is still within blast range. So how rounds travel, they do an arc, they go straight out, and then they start to lose their velocity and fall down, which you should be able to see in these very professionally created keyframe animations. So with the redesign of our optic and a better understanding of how these munitions actually fly, you can see the relationship between what you're sighting down your weapon sight and how that weapon will actually employ that device. It could be said that the earlier aperture with 2 prongs would help more accurately. That way you know that you're getting a balancing and you have that gap in between that's not obstructing your target. And you're right. That could be the case. Everything, again, is gives and takes. There's a certain amount of obstruction that is going to come with these things. If we really wanted to be super high speed with it, you would actually just have a red dot sight on top of the weapon. Now, if it's in lore somewhere that this is a living optic and it's maybe just not animated in game, this is an optic that tells you your ranging and your angle of attack through the lens of the weapon. That's cool, but now we get a continuity error. If we have that type of technology in game, why do we not employ it on other weapons to get higher effect? If the technology works here, we can apply it towards other things. Depending on how in-depth we get with lore, we can even explain it by saying, oh, well, newer technology came out a few years later that allowed that cross-pollination. And now we have technology from previous weapons and generations on newer weapons and generations. This is one of those areas where you really open the floor to the universe to really expand upon itself. Back to what we were looking at here. That is pretty much what we have on the new and updated grenade launcher. If you want to go in and get the actual legitimate in-game map and you know where to find it and do all that, that is awesome and great. And I think the comments would be a great place to leave that for any of the modders that want to get in depth with it. The only other thing I want to point out on this sighting system, if our smart link neural link here was really, really effective, this optic or this reticle should go to the bottom of our screen. It shouldn't disappear. So not only should the numbers that are present, not only should they be accurate, but it should go to the bottom of our screen to help us take those further out shots. Any questions, comments, concerns? Thanks again for all the support on this project. Thank you, KYOT, and your awesome editing skills and opportunity to do some of this, and have a good one.
That was fun to watch, and there's so much chaos that can happen with the grenade launcher in multiplayer matches and the campaign. You can go ahead and check out the other videos me and Instructor Laspina have created together, and you can check out all the videos I've made on my own. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you subscribe to this channel and like this video, that will help everyone see more content like this.
KYOT Coyote.